Now, finally, for some potentially out-of-this-world news, the US Congress has held its first hearing into UFOs in over 50 years. It comes after an intelligence report last year detailed 144 sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena since 2004. Of those, only one was later identified. During this week's hearing, top Pentagon officials said there were still objects that could not be identified.
I would simply say that there are a number of events in which we do not have an explanation, and there are a small handful in which there are flight characteristics or signature management that we can't explain with the data that we have. We'll continue. Those are obviously the ones that are of most interest to us.
Better detection technology and increased reporting from military personnel mean more UFOs are being identified. But is this evidence of aliens or other national security threats?
We do not want potential adversaries to know exactly what we're able to see or understand, or how we come to the conclusions we make. Therefore, public disclosures must be carefully considered on a case-by-case basis.
To tell us more, Associate Professor at the Australian National University School of Science, Charley Lineweaver, joins us from Canberra. Welcome back to the Drum.
Thank you very much.
Now, what's your take on the hearing so far? What have we learnt?
Well, I think we've learned that the Navy and the U.S. Department of Defense has a lot of blurry images of what they call UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. I listened to the report today, and one question you can ask is, what is motivating this? And I think a lot of people feel stigmatized when they're UFO enthusiasts. They show a picture of a UFO and they say to a scientist, look at this. And the scientist says, well, let's look at that more carefully. When did you take it? What do you think? When exactly did you take it? And so scientific scrutiny of some of these UFO enthusiast evidence is kind of deflating, and they feel stigmatized. And so they want the politicians to look into it more carefully.
So you think it legitimises it as a mode of scientific inquiry?
Well, you know, there are three things here. One is the UFO enthusiast. The other is the military, the Department of Defense, that is to protect us from all enemies, foreign, domestic, and alien. And then there are scientists like me who are kind of like Sherlock Holmes and say, okay, when did you take this? I'll give you an example why I was so underwhelmed by this hearing.
Yes.
The presenter, the intelligence of the Navy, showed a video, a 7-second video. And about 2 or 3 frames of this video was a little shiny blob moving across it. And for 5 minutes, they tried to locate the shiny blob. It was only 3 or 4 frames. And instead of, he could have taken a screenshot of the thing and said, this is what we're looking for, this is the blob, but they didn't do that. Another example, they have an SLR camera taking a picture and seeing a triangular alien spacecraft. It's green and it's flashing. And then they say, oh, by the way, when an SLR camera, the optics, look through night vision goggles and everything's green, it makes point sources triangular. And I said, well, why don't you show us that as an example? Show us a point source of light that's being triangularized by the optics, and they didn't do that either. So they didn't take a screenshot, so they didn't investigate the blob, and they didn't do a test to show the triangularization of the night vision goggles with the optics. So I'm very underwhelmed. I would say they get an F- for how badly these things, they say they're investigating them, but I think that's the worst example of investigation I've ever seen. They do not qualify as scientists, not even investigators. I think Sherlock Holmes would have poo-pooed them and stigmatized them. If anybody's going to be stigmatized, it should have been that military intelligence guy.
But we've only just begun. What expectations do you hold for the rest of the hearing? What will we be seeing and hearing?
Well, I have no expectations for the rest of the hearing because the people who are presenting are so bad that I wouldn't even listen to them. There was an hour and 30 minutes on YouTube, and I went through it, and I said, this is stupid. This is the, I don't know, it's emotional, political, but it surely is not science, and so using the word investigation is just ludicrous.
Jamila, is this something that interests you? Do you stop and wonder, do you think it's important that we should have transparency on these sightings by military personnel?
It had never interested me in the slightest until tonight, because that was hugely entertaining. And now I think I might look up a little more often.
You don't stop to wonder, yes. Charlie.
I wanted to defend the military a little bit, because they're in a hard spot, because they have to, they have to protect the country from all threats, foreign and domestic and aliens. And there's a lot of stuff out there that we do not know. And so, UFO is a very good term, a kind of a good term. It's unidentified flying object. That doesn't mean alien spacecraft. But so they have to change the name UFO to UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, just to get away from the connotation that's so strong in the public mind that UFO is an alien spacecraft. Right. And so they're doing the best they can, but they have legitimate concerns about secrecy too. They have a high-tech camera. They don't want to show the enemy how good the camera is, and so they kind of blur it up. But I have very little faith in this investigation.
According to your telling of it, John.
Charlie One Kenobi, thank you. You are our only hope, is all I've got to say. But no, there's a serious side to this, and this is what really troubles me.
Yeah.
The more you feed the conspiracy theorists and the crazy nutbags, they're all going to go back to their cave in the woods and stock up their fresh water and their gun bullets and all the other stuff, the survivalists, and say, they're coming to get us, they're coming to get us. And this corrodes knowledge and science. This takes away from the serious side of running the globe. You've got Ukraine and you've got, Burma, and you've got so many things going wrong around the world, and you get this kind of rubbish coming out. And I hope, beam me up, Scotty, but assuming it's rubbish, and then you go, every idiot is going to take some sort of succor from this and say, aha, there you are, they're keeping stuff from us, they don't tell us what's really going on.
Isn't that an argument for transparency?
You can't trust the government anymore. But why is this stuff even getting the oxygen that it's been given?
There are... Yes, Charlie, you want
to... Yes. First of all, I don't think the evidence is necessarily rubbish. The degree of the investigation is what I'm calling rubbish. I think it's a perfectly legitimate thing to go out and take pictures of things you don't understand and then try to figure out what they are. That is what science is all about. That's what I do every day. I'm an astrobiologist. I'm looking for life elsewhere. I would love to find it. I have lots of friends doing SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. They would love to find signals, but all too often, when they see a signal, they then say, oh, by the way, there was somebody cooking a burrito in the microwave oven that looked like, that turned into your signal. And then you say, okay, you got me. And then you go on from there. That's a level of scientific investigation that seems to be completely missing from this particular investigation. I still think that they're worth looking at, but not in this way.
Right. And there are perfectly serious, eminent scientists who are saying, we just don't know. There could be other forms of life. There could be things. I'm thinking of people like Professor Paul Davies, who just say there is an element of mystery and incomprehension. And yes, we do need to examine everything without kind of saying, look, that an alien came and sat at the edge of your bed last night, necessarily.
Did they?
Exactly. Paul's a good friend of mine. I agree with him completely.
Yes.
You try to get the best evidence. As a matter of fact, I support SETI. You look where no one has looked before, and then you try to figure out what it is. But you don't say, there's something I don't understand. It must be alien intelligence.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. You're to the basic method of scientific inquiry is what you're talking about. Tom, where do you stand on all of this?
Look, let your imagination wander, but maybe we haven't been welcoming enough to these people. And they see this hostile environment with all these sort of narky people.
How should we welcome them, do you think?
Look, I think we should, if we can, invite them in, show that we're not that threatening. They might have really good answers to net zero or how to get to a budget surplus.
Yep.
I just hope they don't come next week. Because, next week, you're going to have either Albo or ScoMo at the Quad, so they're going to have to meet Barnaby or Richard Marles, or maybe they're going to have to meet a whole heap of independents, and that'll look like the bar scene from Star Wars. So,
I love how you assume that if an alien came, they'd go to Parliament House.
Yeah,
that would be the thing they would do.
I reckon they would.
Well, they'd be looking for intelligent life and they wouldn't find it there.
Oh, come on, that's a bit strong.
Charlie.
Well, I'd like to insert a little bit of context to this debate. In the last 20 years, we have found that almost every star has a planetary system, and a significant fraction of those stars have Earth-like planetary systems. Not only that these Earth-like systems are on average about 2 billion years older than our Earth. What that tells you is if life has evolved in these other planets, it has had 2 billion years longer than life on our planet to evolve. What that means, I do not know. No one knows. And so it's a legitimate exercise, however, in science to try to find life elsewhere. And that's what we're doing with the best technology we have. I'm not sure UFOs investigate. So that's what we're doing. As astrobiologists, we're looking for aliens. I think about it all the time. I wonder.
Yes.
But I've been unconvinced by blurry blobs.
Why do you think, Charlie, that we're investigating this now? Why this public trial now? Does it say anything about us culturally that we're looking at? I know there have been a lot of studies saying that people were very interested in the space race and alien, fantasy fiction and TV shows throughout the Cold War, for example, when we were thinking of remote enemies. Is there something to it?
Yeah, I think if you look at the hearing on YouTube, there's an hour and 30 minutes. You look at the first to about 10 minutes, and you'll hear the politicians about why they're calling this. And a lot of it has to do with, I guess, people who look on TV and say, oh, there are aliens, and the military, they don't trust the government or the military increasingly. They're hearing these conspiracy theories. They don't have a way to evaluate them by themselves, and so they want the military to do it for them. And so they say, oh, the military's hiding stuff from us. And so people are a little bit paranoid. The thing we're talking about here, I think, is fear. Look at Putin's fear made him do, this invasion of Ukraine. But Roosevelt said, hey, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And so we should not be afraid. Fear can be motivating, but if you get too much of it, it does all kinds of crazy stuff. And this hearing in Washington seems to me crazy because there was no science that I could detect in it.
OK, good. Be nice to have curiosity without the fear that you talk about, Charlie. We could talk to you forever, but unfortunately we're out of time now. I want to thank John Fain and Sid Marlis, Tom Jucevic, Jamila Rizvi and our guest, Charley Lineweaver. You've got Ellen back tomorrow night. It is our last program before Australia.